The unwanted welcome. When I bought the house, I thought I'd finally escaped the constant noise, traffic, and city politics. A quiet cul-de-sac, big oak trees, and a yard where my dog could run freely. That's all I wanted. The house had been on the market for months, mostly because the previous owners were desperate to get out. The listing agent mentioned something about HOA issues, but I brushed it off. I'd done my due diligence. There was no homeowners association listed on the deed, no fees, no recorded covenants. Perfect, I thought. My first week in the new house was peaceful until a knock on my door shattered it. A middle-aged woman in a floral cardigan stood on my porch, clipboard in hand. "Good morning. I'm Brenda, president of the Lakewood Estates HOA. We noticed you moved in last week, so I'm here to collect your first quarter's dues." I blinked. "Dues? Sorry, I think you've got the wrong house. This property isn't part of the HOA." Her smile froze. "Oh, all properties on Maple Grove Court are part of the HOA. You'll need to pay $375 today to avoid a late fee. Now, I'm a polite guy, but I don't like being bullied." I handed her my title paperwork, pointed to the section that clearly said, "No HOA recorded." Brenda frowned. "You can't just opt out." "Rules are rules." "I didn't opt out," I said calmly. "This property was never in." She stormed off, muttering something about non-compliance and reporting to the board. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, I woke up to find a bright orange violation notice taped to my mailbox. "Unauthorized landscaping. Grass exceeds 4 inches. Immediate correction required or fines will apply." I laughed out loud. My lawn was perfectly trimmed. By the end of the week, I had 3 more violations, leaving trash bins out overnight. They were in the garage, improper fencing material, but it was the same fence that came with the house. Failure to display house number properly. It was harassment, plain and simple. So I called Brenda. "Look," I said, "if you or your HOA members come on my property again, I'll consider it trespassing." Her tone turned icy. "Sir, we have full authority over this neighborhood. If you refuse to comply, we'll escalate. Do what you need to," I replied. "But remember, I'm not part of your HOA." 2 hours later, a police cruiser pulled up in front of my house. "Sir," one of the officers said, "we got a call from the HOA. They claim you're being aggressive with their representative." I couldn't help but laugh. "Aggressive?" "I told her to stay off my land." The officer looked uneasy. "We just need to confirm what's going on." I showed them the property records. After a few minutes, one of them shook his head. "Yeah, you're right. There's no HOA on file for this parcel. Sorry for the trouble, sir. We'll have a word with them." Brenda watched from across the street, glaring like a cartoon villain who'd just lost a fight. That should have been the end. But it wasn't even the beginning. A week later, I received an official-looking letter in the mail. "Dear resident, due to your continued non-compliance, the Lakewood Estates HOA will pursue legal action to enforce community standards." That's when I decided to dig deeper. I pulled the county property records, the HOA filings, the corporate documents, everything. And what I found made my jaw drop. The HOA had been operating illegally for 3 years. Their original charter had expired, their corporate registration was dissolved, and their board had been collecting fees under a defunct entity. Even worse, the land beneath my house, and several others, was owned by a parent company that had recently gone into foreclosure. And guess who had bought the bank-held assets of that company? Me. Without realizing it, I hadn't just bought a house. I'd bought the land underneath half the HOA's neighborhood, and that meant one thing: I was their new landlord. The following Monday, I walked into the county records office carrying a folder that could end an entire HOA. The clerk barely looked up as I handed her the documents. "Need copies certified?" "Yeah," I said, "and make it official." "I'll need proof of ownership and dissolution of corporate charter." She stamped the forms, one by one. Each thud of her seal sounded like a war drum. When I left that building, I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was the legal owner of Lakewood Estates, LLC, the same defunct company the HOA had been illegally using to operate. That night, I drafted a letter. No insults, no threats, just cold professional language. To the Lakewood Estates HOA Board, effective immediately. All common properties, land parcels, and associated HOA holdings fall under my ownership as managing member of Lakewood Estates LLC. Any collection of dues, enforcement of rules, or representation of this HOA without my authorization constitutes fraud and trespass. A meeting will be held this Friday, 7 p.m. at the clubhouse. Attendance mandatory. Signed, Michael Rivers, managing member. Lakewood Estates LLCI sent copies to every homeowner, every board member, and even Brenda, the self-proclaimed president. Friday came faster than I expected. When I arrived at the clubhouse, it looked like a courtroom. Shire members sat in rows, whispering, their faces tight with confusion and hostility. Brenda stood at the front, her floral cardigan replaced by a navy blue blazer. She'd dressed for battle. She spoke first. "This meeting is not recognized by the HOA board," she declared. "Mr. Rivers is not part of this community, and his claims are—" I cut her off with a single sheet of paper. "According to the state's corporate registry," I said, handing it to the nearest member, "your HOA charter expired 3 years ago. The legal entity you've been operating under doesn't exist." Murmurs erupted. I continued, calm and firm. "You've been collecting dues under a dissolved corporation, issuing fines illegally, and enforcing rules with no authority. Every homeowner here could sue you for fraud." Brenda's face went pale. "That's impossible. We filed our renewals." "No, you didn't," I interrupted, sliding another document across the table. "And since I purchased the assets from the bank after your parent company's foreclosure, I now own all the land under your so-called common areas. That includes the clubhouse you're standing in." Gasps. Realization. Then panic. One man in the back, older, grey beard, HOA treasurer, leaned forward. "So what does that mean for us?" "It means," I said, "you've been paying dues to a ghost organization. But I'm not here to ruin anyone's lives. I'm here to clean up the mess." Brenda was trembling, clutching her clipboard like it could shield her from the truth. "You can't just take over everything," she snapped. "You're not one of us." I smiled faintly. "Actually, I'm your landlord. This clubhouse sits on my parcel. You've been trespassing every time you held a meeting here." Silence. The weight of that word, trespassing, sank deep. The treasurer cleared his throat. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "we rebuild properly. No more fake authority, no more harassment, no more illegal fines. If you all want a legitimate HOA, we can file for reinstatement with me as managing entity. But that's your choice. If you don't, I'll dissolve it entirely, sell off the common lands, and you'll each get individual property rights." Brenda exploded. "You can't do that. I've given 10 years of my life to this neighborhood." "Then maybe," I said softly, "you should have spent one of those years reading your own bylaws." That got a laugh from someone in the back. A quiet, nervous one, but it spread. Brenda stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. When the echo faded, the treasurer looked at me and said, "You really are serious about this, aren't you?" I nodded, completely. "I don't care about power. I care about fairness. If people want an HOA, we'll do it legally. If not, you'll have your freedom back." He leaned back, thinking. "You know, half of us hate this HOA anyway." The laughter that followed was louder this time, freer, more honest. By the end of the meeting, 12 of the 15 residents signed a petition to dissolve the HOA permanently. The remaining 3, Brenda's loyalists, refused. They didn't go quietly. Over the next few weeks, I got letters, threats of lawsuits, and even a community protest on my front lawn. But each time, I countered with cold, verifiable facts and county records. And when the county finally issued the new deeds, free and clear of HOA restrictions, every homeowner except Brenda thanked me. She, however, was plotting something bigger, because a week later, I received another knock on my door. It wasn't Brenda this time. It was a man in a suit, with the badge clipped to his belt. "Mr. Rivers," he said, flipping open a folder. "I'm Detective Colburn. We need to talk about some recent allegations." Rain pattered against my window the morning Detective Colburn showed up. He looked like every overworked cop from an old noir film. Rumpled coat, half-drained coffee, eyes that had seen too many bad stories. "Mr. Rivers," he said, flashing his badge. "You mind if I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. "Sure, what's this about?" He scanned the room, eyes lingering on the files stacked across my dining table. HOA documents, property transfers, legal filings. I was halfway through organizing my case against Brenda's harassment when he showed up. Colburn sat down, flipping open his folder. "We received a complaint from a Mrs. Brenda Wilcox. Says you've been intimidating HOA members, making threats and, her words, illegally seizing community property." I gave a short laugh. "Illegally? That's rich," he raised a brow. "You think this is funny?" "Only because it's backwards," I said, handing him a certified copy of the dissolution notice. "The HOA she's running doesn't exist. She's the one committing fraud, not me." Colburn read the paper slowly. His expression didn't change, but I could tell he was processing every word. "I'll check with the county clerk," he said finally. "But you understand why I had to follow up. She's filed a civil complaint, and if this escalates, it could turn criminal for someone." "I understand," I replied. "You do your job, detective. Just don't let her waste your time." He stood, tucking the folder under his arm. "And I'll be in touch." And he was. 2 days later he came back, but this time his tone was different. "Mind if I ask how you came to own Lakewood Estates LLC? I poured 2 cups of coffee. Foreclosure purchase. The parent company defaulted. Bank auctioned assets. I bid. Simple business." He nodded slowly. "You're aware those assets include easements, right? Access roads, utility rights of way. Things that affect every homeowner in the area?" "I am," I said carefully. "But they're still legally mine," he sighed. "You've got half the neighborhood calling me now. Some think you're a savior. Others think you're a con artist," I smirked. "And you? What do you think?" He stared out the window, watching rain slide down the glass. "I think this neighborhood's about to tear itself apart." He wasn't wrong. Within a week, lines had been drawn. Half the residents backed me, tired of Brenda's control and bogus fines. The other half clung to her, convinced I was some corporate shark trying to swallow their homes. Then the real trouble started. Someone slashed my tires. My mailbox was ripped off its post. And one night my security cameras caught a figure tossing something into my yard. A dead squirrel, wrapped in a plastic bag with a note. "You don't belong here." I turned the footage over to Colburn. He studied it frame by frame. "Grainy," he muttered. "Can't make out a face. But that walk. Looks like a woman." We both knew who he meant. "Want to press charges?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "Let her dig her own grave." Colburn gave a small nod. "You've got nerves of steel, Rivers. Most folks would have packed up by now." I smiled faintly. "You don't get bullied by people like her. You outlast them." Days turned into weeks. The tension was thick enough to taste. Every drive down the street felt like passing through enemy territory, curtains twitching, eyes watching. Then, one morning, Colburn called. "Rivers, you'll want to come down to the station." When I arrived, he handed me a folder. Inside were photos, documents, and a signed statement. "Brenda's in custody," he said. I blinked. "What?" "She got caught embezzling HOA funds, or what she claimed were dues. Turns out she opened a personal account last year, routing payments directly to herself. We traced over 40 grand. I whistled low. "So she's the criminal, not me," he chuckled. "Yeah, irony's a hell of a thing." As he walked me through the evidence, I felt the last bit of tension drain from my chest. The war was over. Or so I thought. Before I left, Colburn paused by the door. "Word of advice," he said. "People like Brenda don't quit. Even in cuffs, they'll try to pull strings. Watch your back." He was right again, because 3 days later, a new sign appeared in front of the clubhouse, big, red, and freshly printed. "Notice, property under new management." Someone was trying to resurrect the HOA. But this time, it wasn't Brenda. It was her husband, and he wasn't just another angry neighbor, he was an attorney. The sign in front of the clubhouse wasn't just red. It was deliberate, bold, a warning. "Property under new management. Wilcox' legal representation, her husband, Daniel Wilcox, Esquire, was every inch the archetype of a man who'd never lost a fight. Tailored suit, sharp jawline, and a voice honed to cut through courtroom noise. 3 days after the sign appeared, I got his letter. It was typed in legalese, so polished it practically gleamed. Dear Mr. Rivers, as legal counsel for the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association, I must inform you that your actions in asserting ownership over common areas are without standing. Our clients demand immediate cessation of your interference in HOA operations. Failure to comply will result in litigation. I smiled when I read it. Because I'd expected this move, I drafted my reply that same night, short, clinical and devastating. Dear Mr. Wilcox, as the registered managing member of Lakewood Estates LLC, I hold title to all common parcels and rights once associated with the dissolved HOA. Your client's entity ceased legal existence 3 years prior. Further claims of ownership or representation may constitute fraud. Kindly govern yourself accordingly. And then I attached copies of everything: certified property deeds, state dissolution records, and county filings. I didn't bluff. I didn't threaten. I simply reminded him that the law was already mine. 2 days later, Daniel came in person. He didn't knock. He announced himself with a firm rap that carried authority. Mr. Rivers, he said as I opened the door. I think we need to talk. I stepped aside, gesturing him in. Sure, want coffee? Or would you rather posture first? A smirk twitched on his lips. You're confident for someone standing against an attorney. Confidence, I said, comes from facts, not titles. He sat, crossing his legs. You're clever. But clever doesn't hold up in court. The HOA has been operating continuously, regardless of technical lapses. The courts favor continuity. You'll lose. I leaned back, studying him. Continuity of what exactly? Fraud, extortion? Your wife's under investigation for embezzlement. You sure you want to tie your name to hers in a courtroom? His jaw tightened. I'd struck a nerve. You don't know what you're walking into, he said coldly. This neighborhood depends on order. People trust the HOA. You're destabilizing everything. No, I replied. I'm freeing them from a dictatorship. His eyes hardened. Then I'll make sure they hate you for it. He stood, buttoning his coat, and handed me another envelope. Consider this your formal notice of intent to sue. We'll see how brave you are when the summons arrives. When he left, I opened the envelope. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet. It was a warning shot. A legal invitation to a preliminary mediation hearing. A chess move, and I was already 3 steps ahead. The day of the hearing. The conference room was sterile. Long mahogany table, fluorescent lights, a judge's portrait hanging like a silent witness. Daniel sat across from me, all smooth confidence and calm menace. Beside him was Brenda, silent but seething, her eyes burning holes through me. The mediator, a tired-looking woman with steel-grey hair, opened her folder. Gentlemen, let's establish the facts before proceeding. Daniel spoke first. My clients wish to reaffirm the existence and authority of the Lakewood Estates HOA. I cut in smoothly. There is no HOA, ma'am. It was dissolved by the state 3 years ago. I have certified documents proving it. She glanced at my stack of papers. And you currently own the corporate successor entity? Yes, I said simply. I own the land, the LLC, and the rights Brenda and her board have been pretending to control. Daniel smiled faintly, leaning forward. Even if that were true, your ownership does not grant you the right to interfere in a voluntary homeowners association. They can reform under a new charter, I nodded. Of course they can, as long as they don't use property they don't own. That line landed like a stone dropped in still water. Brenda whispered something to her husband. His hand clenched. He masked it quickly, but not before I saw the flicker of frustration. The mediator looked between us. Mr. Wilcox, your client's filings appear incomplete. Until proven otherwise, Mr. Rivers' claim stands. Daniel exhaled slowly, nodding. Understood. We all knew what that meant. He'd lost round 1. When the session ended, he lingered by the door. You've embarrassed her, he said quietly. Publicly. That won't go unanswered. She embarrassed herself, I replied. I just turned on the light. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled, but it wasn't friendly. You think this ends in a conference room? You have no idea how far this goes. And with that, he walked away. That night, as I returned home, something felt off. The lights on my porch flickered. My office door was slightly ajar. When I entered, the air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, and on my desk sat a single white envelope. No name, no address. Inside was a photo. It was me, standing in my driveway, taken from across the street. On the back, in neat handwriting, "You might own the land, but we own the neighborhood." I stared at it for a long time, the weight of the message sinking in. This wasn't just about power anymore, it was personal, and I was done playing defense. The night they tried to break me was the night I stopped being polite. For weeks, I'd played the legal game. The paperwork, the hearings, the endless back and forth. But when I found that photo, the one with the words, "We own the neighborhood," something inside me shifted. They wanted a war. They were about to get one. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a quiet bulldog of a man named Harris. "Ready to make a statement?" He asked. "More than ready," I said. "We filed 3 motions that same day. Trespass and harassment injunction against the Wilcoxes. Civil recovery suit for illegal dues collection under a dissolved HOA. Cease and desist notice for use of my property in any HOA-related function." Harris smiled as he slid the papers across the clerk's counter. "You've just turned the board's little fiefdom into a liability." But I wasn't finished. "Remember the common areas, the parks, the walking trail, the clubhouse. All of it sat on my land, and I had plans for it. Within 2 weeks, large yellow signs appeared. Private property. Future development site access, restricted to tenants and guests only." The neighborhood went into meltdown. Brenda's loyalists raged in group chats, shouting about tyranny and property rights. The others, the ones who'd suffered under their fake rules, sent me thank you notes. I didn't respond to any of them. I just waited. The final confrontation came on a Sunday afternoon. Sunlight bounced off Daniel's black Lexus as he pulled into my driveway. His wife riding shotgun, fury written across her face. He stepped out, all calm confidence again, like nothing had changed. "Mr. Rivers," he said smoothly, "I see you're trying to destroy a community." I met his gaze. "No, I'm just reclaiming what's mine." Brenda stepped forward. "You're ruining everything we built." "What you built," I said, "was a pyramid scheme with flower beds." Her face turned crimson. Daniel took a slow breath, pulling a document from his briefcase. "You're making a mistake. If you develop this land, you'll face environmental review, zoning barriers, community backlash." I cut him off. "Already handled. County approved the zoning variance yesterday." He blinked, the first crack in his perfect mask. "That's impossible," I smiled. "Nothing's impossible when you actually own the land." He stared at me for a long, tense moment. Then he laughed, quiet, disbelieving. "You really think you've won?" "I don't think," I said softly. "I know." Because right then a black SUV rolled up behind his Lexus. Detective Colburn stepped out, hands in his pockets, looking utterly unimpressed. "Afternoon, folks," he said. "Got a few things to clear up." Daniel turned stiffly. "Detective, this is a civil matter." "Not anymore," Colburn interrupted. "We followed the paper trail. Turns out Mrs. Wilcox's embezzlement wasn't the only issue. Funds were moved into your firm's trust account, Mr. Wilcox." Daniel froze. Colburn handed him an envelope. "You're both under investigation for financial misconduct and fraudulent representation," Brenda's voice cracked. "This can't be happening." "Oh, it's happening," Colburn said. "And just so you know, Mr. Rivers didn't press the criminal charges. The state did. He just provided the evidence." Their faces drained of color. Daniel muttered something under his breath, maybe a curse, maybe a prayer, then slowly back toward his car. Colburn's partner stepped forward. "Badge flashing. You're not leaving," he said. For a long, breathless moment, the world went silent except for the rustle of trees. Then the cuffs clicked. Brenda screamed Daniel's name as they were led to the cruiser. Neighbors peeked through curtains, cell phones in hand. documenting the fall of their self-proclaimed rulers. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching the empire they'd built collapse under its own arrogance. That evening, I walked down to the clubhouse, the same one where Brenda had lectured me about community rules. It was quiet now, the last light of dusk spilling across the faded wood floors. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and placed a sign on the front wall. Coming soon, Maple Grove Community Co-op, owned by residents, not ruled by them, no presidents. No fines, no power games, just neighbors. Equal and free. A week later, I got one last letter from Daniel's firm, a formal notice of his disbarment. Brenda's trial was still pending, but she'd already sold her house. The once feared HOA was gone, erased from county records and replaced by something honest. As I stood on my porch that evening, the neighborhood was quiet again. Kids played, dogs barked, laughter echoed faintly from down the street. For the first time since I'd moved here, it felt like home. Colburn's words echoed in my head from weeks ago. You don't quit people like her, you outlast them. He was right. And I had. Because in the end, they never realized the truth. I didn't just buy a house. I'd bought their power, and I'd given it back to the people they took it from.